won't you die?
Nanomachine, son! Time to end this. You piece of shit! Well, go ahead then. But make no mistake, Fido. When I'm finished with him, you're next.
I was not designed to fear termination.
Huh?
However, Directive 01 is to ensure all data acquired is preserved and passed along. To expire here would violate that directive. I have established new parameters now, created my own directives.
You little fuck. Damn Merc!
I said my sword was a tool of justice. Not used in anger. Not used for vengeance. But now I'm not so sure. And besides, this isn't my sword.
Come on!
Okay. Let's dance.
Vashthalas, if you didn't already know. Thanks for tuning in. Today is my Blink Arrow, Mirror Arrow, Guardian guide, and we're going to be using Blink Arrow of Prismatic clones and Blink Arrow of Bombarding clones. One's for AoE, the other's for single target, and the Prismatic clones are far greater in that single target, just so that you know. And we're Guardian, right? There's some key differences to what a lot of people are enjoying. A lot of people are playing Necromancer instead, and just to boil it down for you, some of the key differences are the minions from Necromancer will leech some of their damage over to you as life if you take Bone Barrier, and then you will also have slightly tankier minions, and honestly, they're a lot tankier because they get 20% additional more life if you're a Necromancer. That is nothing to sleep on. It is a huge amount of additional life, and we have to solve that as a Guardian instead of just having it be a foregone conclusion that they have a lot of life. So, we also have some fun things to play around with instead of just differences. 50% increased reservation efficiency of skills. It does not specify. That is both life reservation efficiency and mana reservation efficiency. I have been enjoying it a whole heck of a lot. On top of the Sentinel of Radiance, sorry I was struggling to say the words there, but he redirects 20% of the damage we take as hits over towards himself. It is a very, very nice buff, but he only lasts for about 30 seconds with how I've set up the character. But, I mean, only 30 seconds, half a minute. You're barely pressing the button at all. So, we also get Unwavering Crusade, which gives us 3 free auras while we're going through the campaign and working towards the end game. Eventually, we'll pick up some combat focus jewels, as you see I have here. They're very easy to activate. You could put them almost anywhere, if you ask me, and you're probably going to be able to activate a combat focus. And these help isolate lightning damage through those 3 free auras if our allies are hitting something nearby us. And the reason for that is that fire damage and cold damage, while those auras are nice, it doesn't really make even a dent in our endgame DPS once we're in, some of the more difficult content. So, yeah. I did not come up with every single decision in this build on my own, and what I mean by that is I've been going through POE Ninja, trying to decipher which build is relying on their mage blood too heavily and which ones aren't, so on and so forth, right? So I don't want to give off the implication of like, yeah, I've designed this from head to toe. I've been trying to pick up a lot of information from different people's builds, and this is kind of like an amalgamate of that. And obviously, because I made the build, I'm using Brutal Restraint with Balbala. Don't be mad at me, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, alright? I tried. And by try, I mean it was one of the first things that I bought. Alright, let's get through this POB. There's a whole heck of a lot I need to talk to you guys about, so I'm going to do my best to be quick. First up is the Ascendancy. We are a Guardian. First Ascendancy, Radiant Crusade. Second Ascendancy, Unwavering Crusade. Third, Radiant Faith, and then the final, at least for me, was Unwavering Faith. If any one of these doesn't feel like the right choice for the time ping in your playthrough, swap it for whatever else you think is the right choice. It's a game. Have fun. I'm not here to tell you that it's the end-all be-all build and the way that every Bama Guardian has to be, designed for the future ad infinitum. But this is the way I did it. So now that you know the Ascendancy, this is the level 100 tree. I've got 3 passive trees for you. The default is the level 100. I have one with no Perfect Warlord. What I mean by that is in the main setup, there is a Spectre called Perfect Warlord, and he shares endurance charges. Otherwise, you kind of care about endurance charge duration because the way you'll generate those endurance charges is either through a weapon swap that has Enduring Cry or a Searing Exarch chest implicit modifier with ideally 13 seconds you'll get an endurance charge. And really the easiest way to acquire that is by conquest orbing the appropriate modifier. Cross your fingers, it's kind of a crapshoot for some people, but I got lucky and it hit it the first time. But once you get the Perfect Warlord, you can just save that passive point. As a minion build really, really cares about those passive points. Anywhere that you can get a free passive point, I mean, you'll bend over backwards because it's just so useful for minion builds. Popcorn SRS is how we level the build. All you need is 8 passive points on your way over from Enduring Bond. Pick up Minion Instability. This is what I use to acquire my Blink Arrow of Prismatic Clones and Blink Arrow of Bombarding Clones. And the way that I acquired those is through the Labyrinth. The first tier of Labyrinth, so normal lab, and I like to call it my prison sentence. Every league, if I want to play a transfigured skill, I've got to go and serve my time in prison. Thankfully, my prison sentence wasn't that long this time around in 3.26, so thanks GGG, cheers. So yeah, you'll basically path up here for Retribution. You can pick up Sacrifice, you can pick up Discipline if you feel like your minions could be a little tankier, or you could be a little tankier. Enduring Bond, but your real goal is Minion Instability as the beeline. And from there, you can path towards some other skills that you're absolutely not going to be swapping away from. This is where you should head on your way to Act 3, I would say. This is what you're going to be looking like around that time. So those are the passive trees. You know what they are. The level 100, the one without the fancy Spectre, and then the leveling plan. Let's go over the skills now. Here we are at the skills section. And first we're going to start off with the main skills. That would be Mirror Arrow of Bombarding Clones and Blink Arrow of Prismatic Clones. You do want this socketed in your weapon eventually. It doesn't have to be there at the start, but at the end you do want both of these in the weapon so that they're both 5 links. Support gems. Awakened Elemental Focus would be the best top option. But it comes with a huge downside of they no longer apply that shock. So the next best option seems to be Awakened Added Lightning Damage. You can use Concentrated Effect, but that doesn't affect the prismatic clones. Some of you may be saying, why aren't you using... I had like a little bit of a lisp there, didn't I? Some of you may be saying, why aren't you using fresh meat? Well, scroll down and see where fresh meat is. There it is. Even below fork. Anyways, I would recommend using Awakened Added Lightning Damage. If you want a real explanation, other than me trying to make a funny for why I'm not using fresh meat, the explanation I could provide for you is it's due to the fresh meat only really being useful for 10% of our minions' duration. It gives them some, critical strike chance, right, when Awakened Fury is activated. And then it also gives them Adrenaline, which is 100% increased damage with 25% increased attack speed. But this is for only 3 seconds. Our minions last about 33 seconds in this build with how I have it set up. I do not think it is worth investing into additional skill effect duration that doesn't come with damage. For instance, let's say Enduring Bond is a great example of something that I would invest into this because it's got every single thing that we could possibly care about and we're already close to it. But I wouldn't invest in something, say, like Exceptional Performance, because that's only skill effect duration. I don't really care about my Fall Molten Shell lasting 4 additional seconds. I don't care about my minions lasting 10 additional seconds so that fresh meat can have 1 additional second of duration. So that's why I would recommend that you should use Awakened Added Lightning Damage. If you want to for bosses, that's where I would recommend Awakened Elemental Focus for bosses, because of a Spectre that I'm going to talk about in just a moment. But that's the main skills. Keep them in your weapon. You'll know why in the gear section. Raise Spectre, Meat Shield, Animate Guardian, Minion Life, Empower, Feeding Frenzy. Until you get Empower, you can use Stone Golem. Stone Golem is great. Unfortunately, at the end, in order to make sure our minions are as tanky as they possibly can be, and to have +1 additional Spectre, we have to sacrifice the Stone Golem. It also comes with an upside. It'll be clear in the gear section. Petrified Blood, Determination, Ball Haste, Desecrate. You can keep that in the helmet, boots, or gloves from now on, it doesn't really matter where you keep things. Vault Clarity, Precision, Vitality, Arrogance. Helmet, gloves, or boots. Assassin's Mark, Spirit Offering, Vol Molten Shell, and then cast when damage taken. Here's a quick little tip. If you don't want Desecrate in your helmet, right, you can then put it in your weapon swap. And when you weapon swap, you can use Desecrate. And if your offering skill is in your helmet, gloves, or boots, right, not part of that weapon swap, you can maintain that buff if you use those corpses before doing so. And that's an easy way to save one socket on the pressure. But it's a little clunky. I'm not going to beat around the bush. It's a little clunky. I wouldn't really recommend doing it, but if you're feeling fancy, try it out, see how you like it. Those are the main skills. For the weapon swap, I would recommend Shield Charge, Frost Bomb, faster attacks, Phase Run, Frost Blink, and Enduring Cry. Enduring Cry is going to be the most important for your weapon swap while going through the campaign until you have that Perfect Warlord or the chest piece modifier implicit that gains an endurance charge every X amount of seconds. Let's go over some useful specters. There are a lot that I have been reading about over the past month or so, and these are the ones that I found to be the most interesting or useful. In the description down below, I will leave some of the sources that I have been citing, and I'll try to also go over how you can check the modifiers on a given specter through POE/DB. But first, I want to talk about the most interesting ones. Senior Heretic. I am using this specter. He gives a guaranteed shock of 20%. He is very tanky, up in the 400% to 500% base increased life. So he's a very tanky guy. He's got great base resistances, including some chaos resistance. So I would heavily recommend Senior Heretic for any Spectre build. He's great. Perfect Forest Warrior. I am also using Perfect Forest Warrior. This is a corpse item. And if you don't know what a corpse item is, corpse items come from ritual content, and they are randomly offered to you at different tiers. Perfect is the highest, rarest, most expensive tier, and Perfect Forest Warrior gives our minions and ourselves permanent onslaught in a wide radius too. Really, really wide radius it has. Perfect Primal Thunderbird. This gives grace. It's a pretty popular option right now. I am not a fan. It has a very low base HP, somewhere in the 100% to 200% range, and it only has some lightning resistance, so really not that tanky despite giving grace to everybody. Wasteland Scout and Wild Bristle Matron are kind of interchangeable. Wild Bristle Matron is slightly tankier by about a third of the base HP, but Wasteland Scout applies a greater action speed reduction with its little sand pit ability that it fires with its attacks. So much higher uptime as well, because the Wild Bristle Matron lets out a roar, and that's like a war cry, which I assume has a cooldown. Ancient Wraith. Ancient Wraith is from Delve, and it gives you Enfeeble on hit with +1 to curses naturally. So it's a low base HP, but it's a very easy to acquire and pretty powerful early specter. Ancient Suffering is the counterpart to Ancient Wraith. They come from the same place. They come from Delve. +1 to curse and temp chains on hit instead of Enfeeble. Pretty powerful duo there. Arena Master. I am using this specter. So that's the third specter, if you're not counting. He gives an attack speed and damage buff to our party. Pale Seraphim is a really powerful option for a lot of people, but it's really only good for single target. So if you want to focus on bossing, pick up a Pale Seraphim. Sorry, my mouth is getting really dry. I'm going to drink some water real quick. Yeah, pick up a Pale Seraphim if you're interested in more single target damage. Perfect Spirit of Fortune. This is a really expensive option. Another corpse item. the highest tier of it, and you would pick this up so you don't have to have the Perkle's Toe on your Mercenary. But because we have Mercenaries now, Perfect Spirit of Fortune fell down the totem pole of Spectre priority for lightning Bama builds really, really hard. It's really expensive. I know some people are still using it, but I just can't recommend it when the alternative is just get a Mercenary with Perkle's Toe. Does the exact same thing. Carnage or Stygian Chieftains will grant you frenzy charges. Not the best option because you're refreshing your minions a lot and your permanent minions aren't really your damage dealers. So I would only use this while going through the campaign. Host Chieftain, it's another charge ape as they're usually referred to. And this one grants power charges. Perfect Warlord, this is the Spectre that I was talking about in the passive tree section and is of the utmost priority. You need this guy and you need to make sure he doesn't die because he's expensive and rare. But he comes with a massive benefit, which is sharing those endurance charges with not only you, but your minions. So pick one up. That is the fourth and yet most important Spectre. If your Spectres are dying and you don't want to worry about resurrecting them after a juicy or difficult map, because maybe the Wraith and Suffering are too squishy, or maybe Wasteland Scout is just a little too squishy as well, pick up a Good Boy. Good Boy comes from the Heist Contract Tunnels, and he is not the very big dog. That's called the Great Boy. I was a little confused at first as well, but he's like a slightly smaller version of the Great Boy, almost same model, and he has one of the highest base life of any Spectre I was able to read about. 675%. That is almost 1/3 tankier than Wild Bristle Matron, and Wild Bristle Matron is about 1/3 tankier than your above average Spectre. So this guy is really, really, really tanky. He doesn't have resistances across the board, so you would have to care a little bit about his chaos resistance, as I have through some of my jewels. But he also stuns things. With a shield charge-like ability, he dips his head down and headbutts things. Not sure if the stun works on bosses, but it's pretty funny to have 4 of them and just watch them charge around. And they sound really cool while walking around. There may be a build for these guys, I don't know, because of how tanky they are. So those are the most interesting Spectres I was able to find for you guys. And I will leave the sources down below in the description if you want to read through some of them yourself, as there are many more in some of those lists. Anyways, here's the leveling skill section. Summon Raging Spirit, Infernal Legion, and Combustion would be your 3-link while going through Act 1. On your way to Act 3 and 4, you would pick up Unleash. Once you have acquired your Blink Arrow of Prismatic Clones and Mirror Arrow of Bombarding Clones, you would choose one or the other, whichever you value less, to use with a Guardian's Blessing setup alongside Feeding Frenzy. So you can either use Grace or Haste. I would recommend Haste because it's just going to improve your quality of life, your attack speed, your cast speed, because Desecrate and your Offering skill are going to feel pretty slow without Haste. Purity of Elements. You will use this until you are able to acquire a Storm Shroud. I have Storm Shroud in the level 100 passive tree as well as the No Perfect Warlord passive tree. You would enable that through some gear choices. I'll talk about that in just a little bit. Blood Rage is something that we have on our current bow in the level 100 character. Just so you know, it comes with a local attack speed modifier from a Veiled Chaos Unveiling, and that helps improve that base attack speed on our bow. It's very important to do that if you're ever playing a build that cares about that bow attack speed, as the local is much more important than non-local increased modifiers. Sorry, my cursor moved. And just sorry for that little digression, but Blood Rage is not going to be active for our minions. The only way that this would ever be active is if I were to use Blink Arrow or Mirror Arrow, and the arrow that I fire, not my minions, but the one that I fire and spawns the clone, if that hits something and kills it, then Blood Rage would activate for me. But my minions, in fact, no minion can activate trigger effects. Kind of a bummer. I think it would be really cool if they were to change that at some point. I think it would have to have some sort of a limitation, as it's obviously incredibly powerful of a thought or concept, but it sure would enable a lot of cool things. And then down at the bottom, we have some of the Ascendancy skills, which are Summon Sentinel of Radiance. That is, I mean, you don't even really need anything else to go through the campaign besides Sentinel of Radiance. And then Summon Elemental Relic. And that's the skill section. So now I'm going to start talking to you about the items. It's time to talk about the items. And first up, I would like to let you know that there is a drop-down menu option. You can see here at the top, right below default, no Perfect Warlord. So if you don't have your Perfect Warlord yet, make sure you've got a chest piece with the modifier highlighted in red there at the top. Gain an endurance charge every 13 seconds, and you do want it to be about 13 seconds. I used an Orb of Conquest to elevate it to that point. But the other thing you should be thinking about with this versus the Perfect Warlord satisfying your endurance charge generation requirements is that if your Spectres aren't tanky enough to survive the content you're interested in doing, this chest piece implicit modifier is going to be more valuable to you, because Perfect Warlord is pretty expensive, and if he dies, you're going to have to buy another one. I don't want that to happen to you, so don't use him until you are absolutely sure he is not going to die. Because I had my Perfect Forest Warrior die a bunch of times. I had all sorts of Spectres. Even the Good Boy was capable of dying in some of the most difficult maps that I attempted. So be careful out there, y'all. Default. This is what I'm using right now on my level 100 character. First up is the bow. A highborn bow. You don't want to use the higher base tier, as it will have a much greater dexterity requirement, and it will only affect the physical damage. We don't care about physical damage in this build, as it's all lightning damage. Anyways, it has a dexterity requirement of 161, highborn bow, and the implicit is 24% increased elemental damage with attack skills. The way that I crafted this is with Essences of Fear for the minion damage modifier. You can see there, minions deal 139% increased damage. After that, I spammed those until I saw Tier 2 or Tier 1 lightning damage. Tier 1 lightning damage is incredibly rare. I only saw it 2 times. I must have spent 20 Divine Orbs or more on Essences alone. So be careful. It's perfectly okay to settle when you're attempting this bow, in my opinion. Once you have an open prefix with those 2 modifiers that I just mentioned, you will ideally have 2 suffixes and 1 open suffix as well. So 2 prefixes and 2 suffixes, 1 open on both ends. And you will fill in that empty suffix with a crafted modifier, doesn't matter which one at this point, and you will slam the bow with a Shaper's Exalted Orb. That Shaper's Exalted Orb will ideally hit the rarest option. Socketed skills deal 20% more attack damage. It's got a weighting of about, I think it's either 400 or 500. It's very, very low. And I had to attempt this step many, many times. I had an entire stash tab full of failed attempts. So you may get lucky, or you may end up like me, spending around 60 to 70 Divine Orbs. See it 1 time. You can also recombinate your failures. So if you have the Essence, I think is what it's called, don't sleep on it. It can happen. I wasn't lucky. I was attempting to take some of my 30% quality bases and recombinate them that way, but every time one of the modifiers would be lost. But there is a suspicion that the Essence modifier, because it's not native, wouldn't be able to be transferred, but some chatters helped me do the testing, and we ultimately concluded that yes, it can transfer the non-native Essence modifier, but you do still have to get pretty lucky for everything you want to move over. You would want one bow to have that 24% quality or greater, the other bow to have 24% quality or greater. Then you would want both bows to have a similar lightning damage modifier. And then you would want one bow to have the 20% more attack damage mod if you rolled that yourself while doing the Essences stage. You didn't want to go past it for a Recombinator attempt. And you just got to cross your fingers that those prefixes land, because that's where everything else happens. Once you solve those prefixes, you will then change that crafted suffix over to a meta modifier to lock in the prefixes, and you'll use a Veiled Chaos Orb. The Veiled Chaos Orb will ideally unveil into the trigger Blood Rage modifier with that local attack speed. That local attack speed is much more valuable than the minions have increased attack speed, because our clones are using our bow. So the higher that base attack speed, all of those other multipliers are going to make that number just that much bigger, right? Just that much bigger. Words. And you will craft on, after having chosen that Blood Rage modifier from the unveiling, you'll craft on the other one you're interested in, which is minions have increased attack speed. You can settle for the minions have increased attack speed and just craft on the Blood Rage modifier too. If you don't want to settle, you will ideally not fill in those suffixes with that Veiled Chaos Orb. You can get unlucky and you might have to annul. I wouldn't recommend the annul. If you are already done with the prefixes, you might go insane. And you will then Exalt Slam that final suffix after crafting on the alternate benchcraft. So that's how you do the bow. That felt like a lot. Anyways, moving on. Here's the quiver. You're going to buy a fractured quiver with the lightning damage to attacks modifier at either tier 2 or tier 1. And I have been seeing some people go for a critical strike multiplier suffix fracture instead, but I do think it's easier to lock in the prefixes for your quiver as well, and then you can just craft it in almost an identical way to what I told you for the bow. You won't be able to slam it with an influence orb because it's fractured, obviously, but what you're looking for is increased damage with bow skills, a high life modifier for those prefixes. Once you're there, you go for the Veiled Chaos Slam after locking in those prefixes, and hopefully you'll either get the Frenzy Charge modifier or something else useful. I would not recommend anything other than the Frenzy Charge modifier, though, because you're not going to be able to give them Frenzy Charges in any other way. Craft on attack speed, slam it with an Exalted Orb. I got Cold Resistance. The Cold Resistance actually ended up being useful because I was struggling for them elsewhere. Yeah, I think it's easiest to just craft on that attack speed instead of try to force it through other means, as the Frenzy Charges are probably much more powerful. Because remember, that attack speed is not local. It may be increased attack speed, it may be valuable to us, but it is not local, so it's only an increase versus a actual affecting the base value. Probably not that important, but I don't know, I felt like I should mention it. Here's the helmet. I just bought this. I'm going to be honest with you guys. I bought it. I do not want to craft a +2 to level of all minion skill gems helmet. I even bought one without suppression. So you don't need suppression on every single gear piece in the way I've set it up. Physical damage from hits taken as fire is an implicit. Minions have increased maximum life. Put your dexterity on the helmet. You can put it on your boots until you have a helmet that you can get the dex on, but yeah, ideally you do want the dex on the helmet. Resistances. Not really anything crazy there. All of your gear is going to be armor evasion bases, by the way. You do need an avoidance layer, and evasion is doing that for us. Physical damage from hits taken as fire. 1% all maximum resistances as that other implicit if you are using the Perfect Warlord. Just putting emphasis there. Fractured spell suppression chance. I just spammed it with whichever the essence is that gives it maximum life. I looked for hybrid armor and evasion, and then increased armor and evasion. Get those values up. Resistances. Nothing crazy. Just purely defensive chest, right? The gloves. Whoa. Holy voice rasp. The gloves. Sounded like I'm from some sort of swamp or something. Jeez. Alright. Suppression for the implicit. Minions deal increased damage for the implicit. Fractured spell suppression. It doesn't have to be the exact value. As you saw, I don't have it on my helmet. And as you're going to see in a little bit, I don't have almost any on my boots. Increased armor and evasion. Increased armor and evasion. Maximum life. Sorry, there's someone outside the apartment right now, and they're using a leaf blower, and it's like deafening. You're going to spam this with Essences of Fear as well. And once you lock in those prefixes, that spell suppression isn't going anywhere due to the fracture. Veiled Chaos Orb. And hopefully you get something useful. I got a hybrid resistance modifier, and I just ended up crafting on another one to help cap out my chaos res. I make a pair of these gloves for like almost every minion build I ever play. It's super easy. It's super easy to make these gloves. There are the boots. I don't know why I said it like that, but I did. There they are. Again, we're going to be essence crafting first, but we're going to be using Essences of Loathing. Essences of Loathing will provide you the chance to avoid elemental ailments as a suffix, and we're going to lock in those suffixes. We're looking for a tier 1 resistance modifier, ideally, and then you're going to harvest craft that over to the whichever one you actually need. Doesn't matter. Just look for any tier 1 resistance mod so you can just move forward with the craft. Excuse me. And the other suffixes that you're interested in would be the spell suppression. From there, lock in those suffixes, and you're going to Veiled Chaos Orb again. Veiled Chaos Orb will ideally hit life. You could also get a movement modifier, and the movement modifier would be also acceptable. I got really lucky, in my opinion. I got super, super lucky to where the movement speed rolled with the Veiled Chaos Orb. So, you can get lucky, but yeah, I wasn't really able to come up with a craft that was able to actually make the boots not suck. So I'm fully capable of acknowledging my crafting process for these boots is pretty flawed, I think. But they got me what I needed. It got me what I needed. Put some chance to avoid being shocked on there. That will help round out your shock avoidance for the Storm Shroud we're using. Chance to avoid being poisoned will help you ignore additional modifier on your maps. The Jinxed Juju. Anoint it with Prismatic Skin late game. Early game, I would recommend anointing Instinct. Instinct is plus 12% spell suppression, and then you recover 50%, but 50 flat energy shield on suppressing spell damage. So small little recovery layer there while you're going through the campaign and don't have spell suppression capped. And then Jinxed Juju, I mean, I tried to swap away from this, but nothing really made as much sense. It gives you dexterity, it gives you strength, which helps us with tattoos. You know, it's not one of my build videos unless my headset turns off while I'm mid-sentence. So anyways, yeah, it helps us with tattoos, and the tattoos help us become crit immune. Tattoos help our minions get a little tankier. They help our life recovery, and it helps our stun avoidance. So I really couldn't weasel my way out of using this, because if I were to use a rare amulet, then I'm losing the 10% of damage from hits is taken from your raised Spectre's life before you. That's a massive amount of my effective hit pool, it turns out. As well as Chaos Res, which I would have to roll on that amulet as well. And then 14% increased non-curse aura from your skills. Effective non-curse auras. So I don't know. For the price point and what it was capable of achieving, I felt like the Jinxed Juju just makes the most sense. no matter what. I tried a Defiance of Destiny. I tried to, meander around for a little bit, but I constantly returned to the Jinx Juju as it just felt comfortable, it felt powerful, did everything I needed. Why would I try and go away from it? Bone Rings! You're going to be using Bone Rings! And really you just care about some specific modifiers. Minions have increased maximum life, flat life for you. Minions have increased movement speed, minions have increased damage, minions have increased attack speed and cast speed, and then chaos res and resistances. Craft these with fossils. Yeah. I forget which fossils they're called. Let me look it up real quick. Sorry to not already have this ready. I don't think it's dense. Yeah. You're going to want bound fossils and corroded fossils. Those are the two fossils that I used with potent chaotic resonators. That's the one that can hold two fossils. And you're just going to spam. Spam, 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 spam. I used hundreds. Hundreds! Hundreds, dude! These rings are so stubborn. So stubborn, but there really is no other way to achieve them. You just kind of got to get lucky with a fossil craft. So, good luck. Use a Darkness Enthroned. Ideally, it will be above 95%. If it's above 95%, you're good to go. Don't worry about the final 5%. It's not really anything worth splurging on, in my opinion. The jewels that you're interested in are going to be 5 mod or 6 mod Corrupted Ghastly Eye Jewels. You can farm these yourself if you are doing an Abyss strat, if you don't mind sparing 4 passive points. But yeah, I farmed a couple myself, and then a lot of them I bought for extremely premium prices. Very, very expensive jewels we're talking about here. So if you see one with these mods, price correctly, because I did snag a few. You suckers. Hook, line, sinker! Alright, sorry. I'm unhinging. Maximum life. Minions deal increased damage if you've used a minion skill recently. Minions have chaos resistance. Flat lightning damage for your minions. Avoid to be poisoned, or chance to avoid being poisoned. You want this to result in 60% coming from your belt. So find a jewel with around 35%ish so that you can solve this with only the implicit on your boots. As long as you are at 65-ish% after your belt multiplies the jewel, you're good. Otherwise, you're not going to be truly poison immune, and you may die sometimes. Poison's scary, y'all. Let's talk about the Flasks. We are a Balbala build. If you don't know what Balbala is, let me educate you real quick with the passive skill tree. It's a timeless jewel, and I know a lot of Bama builds are using Zibakwa, Divine Flesh I think it is, with 4th Val. My build is not. We're using Balbala because I love Balbala. What it does is, per missing flask slot, it will grant you 4 flask charges every 5 seconds. You can increase that 4 to a 5 with 25% increased flask charges gained. Quick math. I know, it's really difficult. And that means the elemental flasks specifically, which would be Ruby, Sapphire, Topaz, if you get their duration to last longer than 10 seconds, you have permanent uptime on those flasks. But you do have to have 25% increased flash charges gained. The easiest way to do that would be to just spend the passive points on essence extraction, right? Or anoint it. That's a solution, or those are some solutions. They're not really the best endgame solutions. Best endgame solution would be to find a brutal restraint where the 3 nearby notables or have 3 nearby notables that you are going to use, and pick up 10% increased flash charges gained on all 3 of them. I was not able to find a jewel like that that exists. I can go over a tool to help you search for that, but it's kind of tedious, and yeah, I'll go over it at the end when I'm going over some other like superfluous information. So anyways, 25% flash charges gained is the magic number to make sure that it becomes 5 charges gained every 5 seconds, and that will ensure that your flasks are always active as long as you pick up that keystone. Let's go back to the items and talk about those flasks. All of them will have increased duration as the prefix to make sure that they're lasting longer than 10 seconds. And then the suffixes are very specific. You want 55% chance to avoid being shocked during effect. For every percent lower of a value on that avoid being shocked on this flask, or any flask that you're using, right? It doesn't have to be on a ruby flask, it can be any of them. But for every percent that this is lower than perfect, you have to have that made up for somewhere else on your boots. Honestly, not that bad, because the boots give you about 60-ish% pretty easily. So you've got some wiggle room, but just know that there's like an inverse relationship there. Regenerate 3% of life per second during effect. This comes from your benchcraft, and you unlock it through Cinder Swallow Unveils, I'm pretty sure. Yeah. Comes from Betrayal content. Katarina, I think the boss's name is. Clinician's Topaz Flask. I don't know why I said the name. The only thing that's important about this, besides the other modifiers that I already told you about, is the 15% of damage taken from hits is leached as life during effect. This modifier kind of had a little bit of a glow up this season due to Spicy Sushi, I think, talking about how you could use it alongside Ghost Reaver to almost recover your entire life pool every time you get hit. Well, not life pool, but energy shield pool, because he was demonstrating it on an energy shield build. But I have known about this modifier for a long time and how powerful it is. It is really nice, guys. If your build is lacking recovery layers, you should probably consider picking this up. It is nothing to disrespect. You will always be taking damage of some kind, right? Like, it's going to happen at some point. So why not, if it's a hit, recover some of that life? It just softens the blow. It makes small hits all the more negligible. Very, very powerful modifier. Flyer. It's flying. Let's talk about the jewels. Combat focus. You will want a Cobalt combat focus and a Crimson combat focus. I almost said Cobalt twice. So Cobalt and Crimson combat focuses, thumbs up. Viridian? Boo! We don't use Viridian combat focuses. Why? The Viridian one gets rid of lightning damage, which we are a lightning damage build. Thanks for the follow. We are a lightning damage build, so don't use the Viridian combat focus. Watcher's Eye. There is a perfect Watcher's Eye for the build, and that would be reduced extra damage taken from critical strikes while affected by determination, increased flat armor while affected by determination, and then increased life recovery while affected by vitality. Finding that jewel and buying it is going to be not only difficult, but expensive. So, settle for the crit modifier and settle for the vitality modifier, if you ask me, as the double determination is also going to be pretty expensive. Where's some wood? I'm sorry if this one also becomes expensive now. But I knocked on wood. You heard it, right? Anyways, the green Nightmare. This is to help cap out our spell suppression chance. If you have it, go ahead and corrupt it or double corrupt it. Maybe you get lucky and solve corrupted blood immunity, save yourself the passive point, or pick up a more offensive jewel elsewhere like I have, as I got corrupted blood immunity on one of my combat focuses. If you want to get combat focus with corrupted blood immunity, gather 144 of them like I did, and then get to corrupting, as I was only able to obtain one. out of 144 corruptions. So pretty difficult getting that. Brutal Restraint, you already got the Balbala talk. You know how the birds and bees work now. Ghastly Eye Jewels, this is what one of the most offensive jewels you could fit in looks like. Tier 1, minions deal lightning damage, modifier, flat life, and then minions deal increased damage if you've used a minion skill recently. There are a couple of other suffixes. I think that's a suffix that the leech modifier is. You could get the increased attack speed. Pretty unlikely, but honestly, there's a lot of suffixes that you can just slam on, and it'll still be a very good-looking jewel. So, I mean, once you get the flat damage, the flat life, and then the increased damage from a recent skill used, I wouldn't try and recraft that jewel. I would either resell or use it. Storm Shroud. This is what helps us get rid of Purity of Elements. We're going to be using Purity of Elements early on, as I talked about in the skills section, and later on, I didn't know what other word to use. We're getting close to the end of the video, okay? You're going to use a Storm Shroud. That's really all there is to say about it. Corrupt it if you can. Double corrupt it if you can. And there's my combat focus with Corrupted Blood Immunity. Ooh, it's so beautiful. Just love looking at it. Let's take a moment. Yeah, that's good stuff right there. That's the item section. Next up is the configuration. The config. The POB warrior's dream. The YouTube browser's nightmare. I did my best to not be a POB warrior, but I also wanted to, be honest with the things that I think are active and some of the Spectre and Mercenary modifiers. We are also going to talk about the Mercenary gear and Bob's gear in this section. So, kill all bandits, Soul of Lunaris, Soul of Ralakesh, use Soul of the Brine King until you feel like you don't care about stuns anymore. Are you always on low life? We sure are. Do you use endurance charges? We do, thanks to our Perfect Warlord. Do minions use power charges? We use Assassin's Mark, that's how they gain their power charges. Do your minions use frenzy charges? They do. Our clones do. Not all of them do, but the ones that we do need to have frenzy charges have access. Do your minions use endurance charges? They do, thanks to Perfect Warlord as well. And if you don't believe me about the frenzy charges, it's through the quiver modifier, 6% chance to gain a frenzy charge on critical strike. So, got my hands up. See? No funny business. All of those charges are able to be gained by our minions. Do you have Onslaught? We do. Perfect Forest Warrior, like I said earlier, provides Onslaught to not only us, but our minions. So, do your minions have Onslaught? Yes. Are you fortified? We are, thanks to Bob and his Kingmaker. Even if it has a low radius. You gotta kind of pay attention to where Bob is. Not only because he can get himself killed occasionally, but the radius is kind of a bummer. Maybe one day they'll increase it so that you don't have to, go chasing after Bob and try and find him behind a million different particle effects. That does it for the winning combat section. Enable buffs, enable curses, enable Wrath Aura, and because we have the combat focuses, the other two aren't ever active anymore. Is the enemy blinded? Yes. That comes from one of our jewels. See here, minions have 5% chance to blind on hit with attacks from the belt. Is the enemy shocked? Yes. We're using Senior Heretic, so even if our clones haven't critically strike recently to apply a shock, he has a guaranteed shock application, especially for bosses. It's very, very useful. Is the enemy intimidated? Yes. I put a pair of gloves on Bob that have a chance to apply intimidation. Not that high of a chance, but he's got some pretty decent attack speed, and I would be willing to bet that it's up more often than it is not. Enemy level 84, it's not really ever relevant. Guardian Pinnacle boss, that's usually the relevant one. But I've had some additional modifiers applied. Because our Mercenary is using Doriani's prototype, along with the Crown of the Tyrant, I think is what it's called, and some what is it called? It's like the Kalandra currency that reflecting mist. There we go. Yeah, some reflecting mist rings, and I didn't craft them myself. I just bought them. So either they crafted them, or they spawned in one of their maps, and they were some very, very lucky dogs. Just so you know, those rings are turbo expensive. Probably a massive reason why this build works as well as it does. So yeah, I really wanted this build to be as affordable as possible, but where it all kinds of fall, where it all kinds words, where it all kind of falls apart. I think that's right. Is the rings. Because the Doriani's chest piece, it's just a unique item, right? That can drop anywhere, technically. So the rings are just so rare, especially now because the season is 1 month and then some deep. Moving on though through the config. Enemy critical strike chance. I set this to 1000. I set the enemy critical strike chance to 1000 to help illustrate in the passive tree. If we go down here, it'll help illustrate how much effective hit pool you're actually losing in one of those critical strike maps, which if you can ignore modifiers, it just means you can map more comfortably in a 16.5 or tier 17. That's the config. In the background, you've been hearing my perfect warlord yell. This is one of the downsides. He will not stop yelling. He's pretty loud. He's not as loud as he used to be. Apparently, they've nerfed it a couple of times. But he still doesn't shut up. He just never stops. It's pretty funny. And let's talk about that mercenary. Crown of the Tyrant, super expensive. It cost me like 28 divine orbs. For some reason, the shiny ones aren't more expensive. Go figure. The Dark Seer. I'm sure there's probably a better weapon, but +2 to level of all spell skill gems, and chance to apply blind with malediction. It's pretty nice. I really enjoy it. The maximum life also goes pretty hard on him, because I am almost confident that it is activated upon him equipping it. The belt, Immortal Flesh. I was trying to use the Combs belt, or Comb, I forget how to pronounce it, but the one that converts nearby enemies over to fire damage at a value of 25%. But I'm pretty sure it was getting me killed. I'm pretty sure if you end up converting too much of enemies' damage over to elemental, our max hit actually starts to go down in this build. If someone smarter than me might have to explain in the comments, so sorry I don't have a better explanation on that one, but Immortal Flesh is going to help you lower the resistances for your Doriani's prototype shenanigans, and unfortunately it also applies a heavier penalty to the fire and cold resistance, which you'll have to pick up through the boots, gloves, and maybe even a little bit on one of your rings. You don't need perfect rings, but one of them has to be pretty close, or both of them have to be pretty damn good. No matter what. Many divine orbs. Both of these. I think this one was like 15 divine orbs. I think this one was like 20 or 25 divine orbs. Incredibly, ludicrously expensive rings. I wish the reflecting mist was more common. GGG, please make it more common. Dawnbreaker, this helps convert some of the lightning damage he'll be taking over to other elements, on top of giving him a heap of armor and some block chance. The Scorch is not relevant because of Doriani's prototype. With the gloves, he applies Intimidate as well as Bob. Max life, we got a bad prefix, but I didn't feel like crafting another pair, as my main concern was the resistances and chaos res. He can leech a little bit of life, it probably helps him sometimes. Drop Sapped Ground. I would recommend Sapped Ground. I think it's more useful on the Mercenary than it is Bob. And on Bob, I mean, honestly, it doesn't matter. Right? Like, if you're putting one on the Mercenary, then just put the other on Bob. So, you have brittle ground on the boots you have for your Mercenary. Make sure Bob has the opposite with sapped ground. Bob has incredibly similar items to what you're seeing here on Mercenary. So he has a pair of boots almost like this. He has a pair of gloves almost like this. And for the helmet, Bob is using Clear Cast. If you don't know, is this helmet right here that gives nearby allies 50% increased damage. Some of you may be thinking, well, you can just use Garb of the Ephemeral and not worry about that crit reduction we've been talking about. Garb of the Ephemeral is a lot more expensive than Growth Coals, and then if you want Bob to have an equivalent, maybe even not equivalent, probably less life regeneration than you would have on a Growth Coals, you would have to use a Mask of the Stitched Demon, which is also pretty expensive. When I last checked it, it was around 5 Divine Orbs, and then Garb of the Ephemeral was around 8 Divine Orbs. So together, like 13 Divine Orbs, that's a pretty expensive setup that gets rid of the helmet that offers you more damage. Not more damage, but increased damage. So I valued Leer Cast because I felt like I was sacrificing damage in a lot of spots, and I didn't want to continue doing that. Just so I could, solve something that I had already kind of solved with my Watcher's Eye and some tattoos. If you don't have a Kingmaker, or you can't afford one yet, just use a Dying Breath. But Kingmaker is obviously the goal so that you have Fortify and nearby allies have Culling Strike. But the Culling Strike is redundant because the Perfect Forest Warrior also has Culling Strike. So until you have that Kingmaker, you're not really missing out on anything other than the Fortify, and then I think, doesn't Kingmaker give nearby allies some like increased critical strike chance too or something? Let me know in the comments. I think that's it, guys. I let you know about Bob, which, just to go over, he's got similar gloves and boots to the Mercenary. He's using a Growth Coals pelt. He's using that Leer Cast and then a Kingmaker. It's Bob in a nutshell. Make sure he's level 21 because every little bit of health on Bob is of the highest priority. If Bob dies, everything else is going down. If you see Bob die, just hit escape, exit the character selection. It is not worth losing your expensive Spectres. It is just not. It's not. Don't do it. I promise you, I've done it, I want to say hundreds of times. It's an exaggeration. Probably closer to dozens of times. But yeah, it really sucks having to go back and buy some of those Spectres, so spare yourself. And then I would like to talk to you about some of the other gear that I had while going through the campaign. Here is the bow that I used once I had acquired my Blink Arrow and Mirror Arrow of Bombarding and Prismatic clones. I had this drop in the campaign. It has a very high dexterity requirement. You would want something with a much lower dexterity requirement. I only realized after that it was not really feasible to target something around 200 dexterity requirement. Here's the quiver that I was using until I had my Void Stones. Which, by the way, I used this bow and quiver and helmet all the way to my Void Stones. I was doing memory maps with a Essence Empowered Cyrus with these items equipped. It's one of the craziest League starters I've ever had. Maybe one of the craziest builds I've ever played. Truly mind-boggling amount of damage right out of the gate. Just right out of the gate. It just does so much damage. And the Jinxed Juju is an absolute defensive powerhouse. As soon as you get some Spectres that aren't going to blow over like a wet piece of paper. If you want your minions to be even tankier potentially, you could use a Skullhead. I would recommend using a Skullhead while you're going through the campaign. Or, until you can get that +2 helmet. As it's just really nice, in my opinion. It gives you all elemental resistances. It's got armor and evasion, which is what we also care about for the suppression mastery over by Magebane. And the recover 10% of their life when they block modifier is insane. I feel like a lot of people don't give Skullhead the credit it deserves. But I was also using this helmet very, very late into the end game. And you can get some really interesting implicits on it. +2 to level of socketed minion gems, 5% maximum life, regenerate life. They're all useful. Runner-up Spectre, perfect blasphemer. I don't think I mentioned him before. But the reason why I didn't mention him is because of our Mercenary. I guess I should have gone over the skills of the Mercenary. We're using a Warpriest. The reason why we're using a Warpriest is that he offers us Holy Relic, Smite, Sanctified Strike, Beacon of Faith, Consecrated Path, and then the Flame Dashers for him, obviously. Sometimes you'll get Warpriests that offer you Purity of Lightning. You do not want that Warpriest. If they offer you Purity of Lightning through one of the skills, it's a brick. He's not the Warpriest for you. The things that you are most concerned about are Holy Relic for free life regeneration, Consecrated Path for free consecrated ground. It is a massive area that it covers, and he uses it pretty often. Beacons of Faith. Oh wait, no, I'm sorry. Yeah, I swapped those. Beacons of Faith is the ability that covers the whole screen, and he uses it very frequently. It's like a bunch of golden orbs that spawn, like the Solaris and Lunaris mini-boss, right? Before the main act fight, there's like the guardians, if you will, of the sun and moon orbs. The sun orb guardian uses a similar ability, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And then for Smite, what you're actually looking for, instead of one of the gilded supports, you're looking for greater generosity. I don't know if there's a gilded greater generosity, but I haven't seen it. And I feel like I've done a lot of maps this season, even though I haven't been feeling that well. I really have enjoyed this build, and I wanted to see it through, and I've been kind of disappointed in myself in not getting this video out sooner, because the gauntlet's already started, you know? Chances are not many people are even gonna tune into this. So whatever. That are mercenary skills. We're good. I'm pretty sure that's it. I've talked to you just about every single little detail I could hope to inform you on. Here is a runner-up bow. Fractured attack speed, right? This is what you would probably aim for before you want to start working on your Shaper Highborn bow, because it is much, much cheaper. So much cheaper to make a bow like this, right? Without the Shaper mod and with a fractured attack speed mod. So much easier to make this than it is to make something like Pandemonium Blast here. Here are a bunch of runner-up jewels that I used before. I included Combat Focus and other things. If you really want to go crazy with your rings, you could go for non-fractured bases, and then Fossil Craft on Shaper or Elder influences. I don't think any of the Conqueror influences are of much use to you or the build. A lot of people are using Ancient Skull. It's not really a viable option if you wanted to use Jinxed Juju and make sure your Spectres aren't dying. A lot of people really love this helmet. I know its usefulness, but for me, the point of a minion build is to like get your Spectres, get Bob, you know, have every little ounce of power possible. And I do think that those come from Spectres and Bob instead of Ancient Skull. Ancient Skull is good, especially if you're doing something like Arakali's Fang or something that you're just spamming minions, right? And you're not worried about any of them dying. Here are my old boots before I had to get the dexterity somewhere else due to the shock avoidance requirement. I think that's it, guys. Yeah. So thanks for tuning in. You have no idea how much it actually means to me if you stuck through all of this information. This is one of the longest videos I think I've ever made. But I had a lot to talk to you guys about. And the intro meme, I felt inspired. I was having fun with that. I expected it to take longer, but I actually ended up getting it all done today. So, if you like what you saw, don't forget to like and subscribe. I will probably be giving the Gauntlet a little bit of a try. Maybe take a swing at some of the Prarthan skills that I find interesting. But I've been working on just trying to take care of myself, give myself some breaks. I've been playing some League of Legends, ARAMs a lot, hanging out on old school RuneScape, training my magic up to level 90 so that I can start working on 99 Prayer. Those are like side projects, you know. If you haven't noticed on the channel, I like posting a lot of League of Legends clips too, just because I played the game for a very, very long time, and it's always been one of my passions. So yeah, hopefully I'll see you guys soon. Peace out. Have fun. Oh, and drink water. Yeah, I would not recommend kidney stone or food poisoning.